It's no secret that Arsenal's defence are pretty good this season. They have conceded the joint fewest goals in the Premier League along with Newcastle United, and that's usually a pretty good sign that your defence is holding up well. But in this video, I want to argue that Arsenal's defence is even better than you think it is, and to explain why, we need to understand how it is that Arsenal are trying to play football. So on the board in front of me, I've got Arsenal. We've looked at this team a lot over the course of the season so far, but we've got their 4-3-3-ish. You can do different things with the midfield if you want, but it's largely a 4-3-3. And what Arsenal are going to try and do is they're going to try and possess the ball, they're going to try and dominate the game, and they're going to try and control the ball, but they are going to try and possess the ball in very specific areas. They are going to try and get the ball into the final third of the opponent, and when they do that, they're going to be aiming for these spaces between the opposition back four. So we will see Arsenal players occupying these spaces. We'll see Saka on the outside here, Martinelli on the outside here, Ødegaard sitting in here. Now there's various things that can happen in this space. We call this the half space. We are seeing Granit Xhaka getting forward a lot this season, dropping in here. But you can also see Zinchenko, the left back on this side. He could get into this space, or actually could perform more like a standard left back and overlap rather than underlap, have Martinelli coming inside like this. But this is a very aggressive way of playing. What you're trying to do is get 5 attacking players into the opposition back line. So it's a very high risk way of playing because you're leaving the rest of the pitch open to be exploited by the opposition. Now, we need to talk about rest defense. Rest defense is a word which comes from a German phrase, Rest Verteidigung. Sounds very complicated, but what you really need to remember when we talk about rest defense is that the word rest, as the Germans use it, is used slightly different to the way that we might naturally associate that word rest. So when we hear the word rest, we think chilling out, relaxing, other trendy words like that. But actually when the Germans are using it, they're using the other meaning of the phrase rest, which is everything that's left over, so the rest of the players. And so when we're talking about rest defense, we're saying when Arsenal are going forward with their attacking players, what are the rest of the team doing? And there's very specific things that can happen. So how are Arsenal structuring their rest defence this season? Well, the most important concept to remember with Arsenal's rest defence is narrowness. So we have a back four here, 2 centre-backs, 2 full-backs, but actually what we've seen a lot happening this season is particularly on the left-hand side, one of the full-backs inverting, getting very narrow alongside Thomas Partey, the 2 centre-backs pushing up, and then we have Ben White who can do one of 2 things. He can either invert like Zinchenko, but on the right-hand side, and sit alongside here, or we can see him sitting a little bit deeper like this and forming a back 2 here. So we would call this structure a 3-2 rest defense structure, and this one we would call 2-3. It would be a little bit more central here. But the big question is, why would you defend in this way? Because as you may have noticed, Arsenal are leaving a lot of space in wide areas here. So if the opposition were to win the ball back, it might seem obvious that they should just play the ball out here and then they can spring a counter-attack on Arsenal. But what's important to remember is that Arsenal have structured themselves in this way because they know that they can manage these sorts of situations, because for the ball to travel here, find a player, and then travel the distance again to the goal, they know that they can drop this unit defensively into a position where they can defend well. And so this defense structure that we've got here actually allows Arsenal to be really aggressive going forward, but also allows them to mitigate these sorts of problems that emerge during the game. And this is what happened at the weekend against Chelsea. So let's just take a look at a couple of examples of the way that this worked in that game. So on the board in front of me, we've got Graham Potter's Chelsea as they played against Arsenal at the weekend, playing in a 4-4-2 structure, or 4-4-2 diamond, we usually call it, with this diamond in midfield. And let's just imagine then that Arsenal are in their attacking phase, so they're pushing all of their players forward into these gaps between the back four. They've got their rest defense structure, as we've already talked about it here. So what we're seeing is something like this. Ben White in here, then your 2. So we've got your 2-3 here, or 3-2, depending on where Ben White is. But Graham Potter is a smart manager. He recognised that the weakness that exists in Arsenal's attacking structure is this wide area here. And so when Arsenal were going forward, he made sure that Raheem Sterling occupied this space, went really far wide, hugged the touchline, and stayed on the last line of the Arsenal defence. And the general idea then was that when Chelsea won the ball back from Arsenal's attack, they were going to immediately look to find Sterling and then counter-attack in that way. So when Sterling has the ball, Arsenal do a couple of things. First thing is that the ball near centre-back, that's the centre-back nearest the ball, comes across to track Sterling. That's because Zinchenko is ahead of the ball. He's got no chance of getting back to Sterling, even though you might think that he would be the one to defend. Now, when Gabriel goes across, Zinchenko realises that there's a dangerous situation coming on. Kai Havertz is in this sort of area usually, and he's going to try and get in behind here to receive the pass from Sterling. So Zinchenko automatically is going to get into this sort of situation where he can replace Gabriel. Now Saliba obviously recognises that Gabriel goes across, and he's going to come into this area, and then Ben White, who's the final member of the back four, recognises that because Saliba is pulling across, then he has to come into this sort of area too. So Havertz is going to be around here, Zinchenko will be tracking him, Aubameyang will be much more central because he's the striker, he's going to sit in here, and then Ben White is going to come in as well, just to make sure that they've got double coverage on the striker here. And the general idea then is that when the ball comes in down here, even if Havertz gets it, you're hoping that there's going to be a decent defensive structure to stop Chelsea from causing any problems. That's the theory. Let's see how it looked in practice. So I've just got two examples of how this played out in the game itself. Got really nice footage here from the tactical camera that was shown during the game, and it gives you a nice overview of everything that's going on. So here's Arsenal's defence. They've just been attacking in this area. Mendy now has the ball. Here's the rest defence structure we've talked about. So two centre-backs here, and then we've got the three structure here. So you can see Ben White a little bit further forward. We could maybe include him in that three and call it a 3-2 structure, but that's by the by. But the general idea is narrowness that Chelsea are going to try and exploit. Here's Raheem Sterling with the arrow pointer. You can see how he's super wide in this kind of area, and Mendy's going to play the ball immediately to him. They're going to try and exploit this wide area. So here's Sterling now, he's got the ball with his feet, and as you can see, as we showed before, the two centre-backs have shifted across, and Zinchenko is going to come into this space here to make sure that Havertz can't get ahead of him, and then Ben White here is going to cover for Saliba, who is pulling across. Here's Sterling, he's going to play the pass. Now at this point, Zinchenko makes arguably a mistake. So he sees this pass is coming in, and he thinks he can take the straighter route towards the ball, cut the pass out before Havertz gets it. Actually, maybe what he should have done is dropped him behind, allowed Havertz to get the ball, and then been in a position where he was goal side of Havertz, but that doesn't happen. But the important thing to note here is Saliba is coming across to cover for Gabriel. Ben White has recognised that Aubameyang is a problem, so he's coming across as well, and Thomas Partey is here, so he's going to be on the edge of the box if the ball comes out. So really nice defensive structure. Yes, it looks quite dangerous for Chelsea, but actually what's going to happen is that Arsenal are going to defend it in a really adequate manner. So when the ball actually comes in, as you can see, this is Zinchenko. He's the wrong side of Havertz, but because of the structure that Arsenal had, everything is fine. We've got Saliba here. He's going to stop Havertz from being able to get to the goal too dangerously, but also you can see that Ben White has caught up with Aubameyang. He's stopping this ball in here. Here's Thomas Partey stopping Mason Mount from having any danger. So what looked like a really dangerous attack at the time has actually been managed really well by Arsenal. Now I've got a second example here, which is slightly different because it's a little bit more dangerous than the first one. And that is because Gabriel here on the board in front of me has just played a really bad pass into this area. It's been turned over by Chelsea. And as you can see, Zinchenko is much further ahead of the ball than he was in the previous clip. But we've still got that rough structure here. We've got the two centre-backs here, and Thomas Partey is dropping in to replace Zinchenko in this one. So the ball is going to go to Sterling, who is wide again. This time Thomas Partey is going to track Kai Havertz. Gabriel will go across, and then we'll see how the structure breaks down from that point onwards. So again here, this is a very similar structure to the previous clip that we've just seen. We've got the two centre-backs moving across. You've got a player tracking Havertz's run here in Thomas Partey. Now, Zinchenko is over here. In the last clip, Thomas Partey was over here. So this is a much more open structure than it was, and that's because it was a dangerous turnover. We've got Ben White here. He's dropping in onto Aubameyang with Saliba as well. So very, very similar structure, one fewer player in that structure. And the same thing happens again. So Sterling is here. He's going to play the ball in here. Kai Havertz is going to try and get the ball in this kind of area, and Thomas Partey is going to try and stop him. Saliba is here. He's going to push across, and then Ben White is across here, and he's going to try and get to Aubameyang. The same thing happens, the ball goes in, and actually the Arsenal player doesn't actually manage to get to the ball in time, and he ends up the wrong side of Kai Havertz. But interestingly enough, Saliba is pulling in here to make sure that there's no danger, and Ben White is actually still trying to catch up to Aubameyang. And the reason why he's slightly slow in this instance is because Mason Mount is here, Ben White is keeping an eye on him, but because Zinchenko is over here and Thomas Partey was in this area in the last clip, actually starts causing structural problems. So what we're going to see is the same sort of thing. Havertz is going to get goal side of his man and Arsenal are going to have to defend it. And that is what it looks like in this instance here. So slightly different because Ben White was worried about Mason Mount and actually should have been more worried perhaps about Aubameyang because Saliba had to go across. But even though this looks like a horrible situation, if the ball comes through to Aubameyang here, you think that's an easy chance on goal. Actually, Saliba has marked his player really well and has got him into a situation where he cannot make this pass through unless he's a little bit lucky. And in the end, Havertz actually just takes the shot straight at Ramsdale and Ramsdale picks it up. So Arsenal's rest defence, 2 examples there. And in both instances, it looks like it's very dangerous. Actually, the BT commentators at half-time said, this looks like Arsenal are super open and they're lucky not to concede from these moments. But actually, the whole idea is that Arsenal, because they're wanting to get so far up the field, they're defending in a very specific way that is designed to stop these counterattacks from being dangerous. And so in this instance, Arsenal's defence did exactly what it is meant to do. And because of that, Arsenal are in the position that they're in this season at the top of the Premier League. And if you want to keep up to date with all of our Arsenal coverage, then make sure you're subscribed to the channel. There is a bell notification that you can click just below me on the screen, and that will allow you to be notified whenever a video drops onto our channel.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic brings you the best sports journalism in the world in a personalised experience, connecting you with the stories and teams that you care about the most. There's coverage of 13 sports, plus direct access to world-class journalists through live Q&As, discussions and podcasts. And you can try it now for free for 30 days by clicking the link in the description.